Hello, this is Hui Chao. In this video, I'm going to give you an overview of delivery models of early intervention services and some strategies to make decisions. Just as you read from the readings this week, there are many ways to divide types of service delivery. One of the important ways is to divide by where the service is delivered. Is it delivered in a center or is it delivered at home? In a center-based delivery model, terms you usually hear are curriculum. Like a lot of centers, they follow some curriculum or several curricula to plan for their instructions. You also hear the word classroom in management a lot because in a center, there are usually more than one child to receive all kinds of services. So in a classroom, it is important to use some classroom management strategies to maintain good classroom order and to make learning effective. On the other hand, services delivered to home usually target younger children, such as infants, toddlers, under 2 years old, and they use different strategies to deliver their services, such as parent coaching strategies or using some parent-mediated intervention models. Basically, all the early intervention services can be put on a spectrum ranging from the least restrictive and most integrated kind of service to the most restrictive and least integrated kind of services. For example, in this diagram, you would see in the bottom, it is the mainstream preschools or home delivery. Usually these kind of services are least restrictive because children are learning alongside their same age peers, and they are most integrated. Children have plenty of opportunities to interact with typically developing peers. But on the other hand, because of the teacher-child ratio, usually there are one or two teachers working with a large group of 20, 30, or even 40 young children. On top of that, you see the integrated community-based programs, which is in between the centralized early intervention programs and the mainstream preschools setting. These type of programs usually are such as one specialized classroom attached to a preschool site that you still go to a preschool for your daily services, but instead of going to the mainstream classroom, you go into a specialized classroom. And on top of that, it is the centralized early intervention programs, such as the EPIC centers in Singapore. There are several centers across the country, and if you are qualified for the services, you have to go maybe a long way to the appointed centers for the services. And then the most restrictive type of service is the residential facility services. In such facilities, service receivers, such as children or adults, they stay in a residential site, which means they don't go home. They spend most of the time in this residential facility. Similar to the previous slide, here are the services provided in Singapore, ranging from the least specialized support from preschools to the most specialized support and most segregated setting, such as the EPIC centers. So in preschools, usually there are some services, not in all preschools, but in some preschools, there are public funded services targeting children with mild to moderate level needs or children from at-risk background, such as low-income background. On top of that, you see developmental support or learning support, which is a program being rolled out to fewer than 20 preschools now, I guess. And this DSLS program targets children with mild developmental needs. They provide services covering speech, language therapies, social skills building, motor skills, behavior, and literacy needs. Their goal is to optimize developmental outcomes for children attending preschools. On top of that, there is an ICCP program targeting children with mild special needs. There's no intervention provided, but they focus on modifying the curriculum in the preschool. And there are some therapies also provided at KKH or NUH for identified disabilities to teach children self-help skills in mobility, play, or socialization. And the most specialized support is provided in EPIC centers. They are self-contained early intervention centers. Children going to EPIC centers usually have an identified disability, and the goal in EPIC Center is to maximize children's developmental gains and to minimize secondary disabilities. Now there is a new program called DS Plus. It is like a bridge between EPIC centers and preschools for those children who have gained sufficient progress in EPIC centers and who are getting ready to go back to preschools. And another new program is called the EPIC Under 2, which is targeting younger children from birth to 2 years old. Usually they deliver services at a home environment. Then now you may be wondering what kind of services are provided in all kinds of different programs. Why are they so different? A paper published in 2016 tells you a little bit about that. In EPIC centers and private early intervention centers, you can find a high percentage of providing specialized, individualized supports, such as some therapy services in group or individual size, or some specialized, individualized instructions for children. On the other hand, the ICCP and preschools, they usually provide good opportunities for children to be interacting with typically developing peers, but only 13.8% of preschools reported that they provide specialized teaching or learning supports. Now, if you put your shoes in a parent's, you may be wondering, why would I have to sacrifice one in order to get the other? Why can't my child get both opportunities to interact with typical peers and individualized and high quality specialized supports in the same place? In fact, many parents in Singapore are trying to provide their child the best without sacrificing one or the other. A study in 2018 showed us that most children attending EPIC, they also attend a mainstream preschool or childcare center in their community. Even those who need high level of support, they are in our community mainstream preschools. As a result, our services in Singapore are heading towards a trend that is, they are overlapping with each other and filling in the gaps in between, in order to enable children to receive high-quality individualized supports even in a community preschool setting. This brings us to the next topic for discussion today, which is how do you decide in the same preschool classroom which children need intensified, individualized supports and the others don't? I'll give you a brief introduction to this pyramid model called Multi-Tiered System of Support, MTSS, which includes 3 levels of support: universal level support for everyone, and secondary level support for small groups of children, and intensive individualized support for a tiny bit small percentage of all children. It is a evidence-based model for deciding where to pour your intervention services and resources in a community-based preschool setting. You can see that there are other names for this pyramid model. Some people call it positive behavior intervention and support, PBIS. Some call it the response to intervention. Some call it the recognition and response or teaching pyramid model. They refer to the same ideas, but maybe focus on different aspects of development and learning. Just a little bit of the history of this pyramid model. It was originally developed for public health prevention services. That includes primary prevention services, secondary prevention, and tertiary prevention. Ever since this pyramid model being introduced to education, it was adapted into two sets of pyramid. One is the response to intervention model, which focused on learning needs of children, and the other one is the positive behavior intervention and support model, focusing more on the behavioral needs of children. Both of these pyramid models share the same structure, which starts from the least specialized, least individualized, and the lowest intensity and lowest frequency of instruction in the bottom. These kind of universal support are designed to meet the needs of 80% to 90% of all children. But on top of that, when all children receive universal support, there are about 5 to 10% of them are not receiving enough support. So they need the secondary support. In the learning needs aspect, they need to learn how to be independent in learning, how to initiate then only responding, and how to perform quickly with accuracy. On the behavioral side, these 5 to 10% of children need to learn social skills in a group setting. They need to use some sensory tools to address their sensory needs, and they need to learn social skills in using social stories strategy. On top of that, there are still 1 to 5% of children, even when you provide both the universal support and the secondary support, these 1 to 5% of children still need more. So what they need are very foundational or prerequisite skills in learning, such as to develop their joint attention, to be able to stay on task, or to receive some speech therapy to help them communicate. Or on the behavioral side, they need functional behavioral assessment and intervention to address some really intensive behavioral needs. An important takeaway message is that these pyramids, they were not developed to categorize children. They were developed to categorize needs, which means that the same child may have individualized intensive need in math education, that the child needs very foundational training in order to understand very basic math concepts. But on the other hand, this same child may not have intensive behavior needs. A universal support may be just enough for this same child. So we have to look at each child in each domain of learning and development to decide what kind of level of needs they need. In this sense, using a data-driven decision-making model is very important to tell us which child needs what level of support in which learning or development area. In short, we grouped needs, not children. Okay, now that you have finished an overview of the early intervention service delivery models globally, I would like you to bring to class your questions about the service delivery models in Singapore. What would you think can be promising and beneficial to